Welcome to the Google Cloud Update for the week of February 12th, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a jam-packed episode for you today. It feels like AI is the word of the week, with a huge push to connect AI applications directly to your databases and observability tools. On today's show, we'll be covering a major GA for Cloud SQL and Vertex AI integration, new remote servers for Cloud SQL, Spanner, and Firestore, making it easier for AI agents to interact with your data, a host of new AI-powered features in BigQuery, including dataset insights and multi-category classification, an important security vulnerability in GKE that you'll want to patch immediately, plus a new migration path from App Engine to Cloud Run, updates for Looker, Cloud Build, VPC, and a whole lot more. It's a big one, so let's get right to it. Kicking things off in the world of compute, we have a few exciting updates for Cloud Run and App Engine. First, the OS-only 24 runtime for Cloud Run is now generally available. This OS-only runtime is fantastic for developers who want to deploy applications from source, especially for languages like Go, or even deploy binaries like those created with Dart. It gives you that extra bit of flexibility when you need it. Speaking of flexibility, if you're still running applications on App Engine Standard, Google has just released a new tool to make your life easier. Now in preview, you can use the gcloud beta app migrate to run command to deploy your existing App Engine Standard apps directly to Cloud Run. This is a great step forward for modernizing your workloads and taking advantage of Cloud Run's serverless capabilities. Now let's talk Kubernetes Engine. As usual, there are a lot of version updates across the rapid, regular, stable, and extended channels. Version 1.35 is now the default in the rapid channel, and a wave of new patch and minor versions are available for manual and auto upgrades. We won't go through all the numbers here, but the key takeaway is to check your release channels and maintenance windows as new auto upgrade targets are rolling out. More importantly, there is a critical security bulletin to address. A high-severity vulnerability has been found in the Linux kernel that could lead to a privilege escalation on container-optimized OS nodes. This affects GKE standard clusters. The good news is that GKE autopilot clusters are not impacted by default, and clusters using GKE sandbox are also not affected. To protect your GKE standard clusters, you need to upgrade your node pools to one of the new patched versions. We'll list the minimum recommended versions in the show notes, so please check those out and patch your clusters as soon as possible. All right, let's switch gears to the data and analytics space, which is absolutely buzzing with updates this week. BigQuery is leading the charge with a ton of new AI-powered features. First up, in preview, we have Dataset Insights. This feature helps you understand the relationships between tables in a dataset by automatically generating relationship graphs and cross-cable queries. It can even generate dataset summaries and suggest analytical questions, which is incredibly helpful for data exploration. Also in BigQuery, the AI.classify function, now in preview, supports classifying your input into multiple categories. This is great for more complex labeling tasks. And for those of you using the AI.generate and AI.generate table functions, you can now provide descriptions for fields in your custom output schema. And this feature is generally available. On the data pipeline front, running pipelines in BigQuery is now more flexible. Now generally available, you have 3 distinct execution methods: running all tasks, running just selected tasks, or running tasks based on selected tags. This gives you much more granular control over your workflows. Finally, for BigQuery, you can now customize the scope of data documentation scans to generate specific insights, like only SQL queries or only table descriptions. Plus, you can create one-time data scans that execute immediately and even set a time to live to automatically clean up the scanner resource. Moving over to Cloud Data Fusion, version 6.11.1.1 is now generally available. This release introduces Instance v3 as the new default monitored resource for metrics and logs, which simplifies the resource labels. The release also includes several important fixes, including one for a security vulnerability in preview runners, and others to address issues with message publishing retries, hanging task workers, and API pagination. Whew. And now for Looker. There are a lot of updates here, so let's hit the highlights. A big one for database fans. Looker now has full preview support for connections with AlloyDB for PostgSQL. You can now select it directly from the dialect drop-down menu when creating a connection. For you Gemini users, the Customer Engineer Advanced Editor default role now includes permissions for Gemini in Looker and conversational analytics, giving you access to those features right out of the box. There are also a bunch of UI and feature enhancements. The User Attribute Pairing interface for SAML, LDAP, and OpenID Connect has been updated with a new side panel for easier management. For Looker original instances, admins can now grant essential Google Cloud Services access even with an IP allow list active, and they can enforce a password expiration policy for better security. There is one breaking change to be aware of. If you use Elite System Activity, any long text fields larger than 2 megabytes will now be truncated, so keep that in mind. And as always, there's a huge list of bug fixes improving everything from conditional formatting and custom dimensions to dashboard rendering. It's great to see so much continuous improvement. Now for what might be the biggest theme of the week, connecting AI directly to your databases. Google has introduced a new concept called a Remote MCP Server, or Model Capability Platform Server, for several of its database services. This essentially acts as a bridge, allowing AI agents and applications like Gemini or Claude to interact with your data in a structured way. This new remote MCP server is now available in preview for Cloud SQL, covering MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server. It's also in preview for Cloud Spanner and for Firestore. This is a massive step towards building more powerful, data-aware AI applications. Building on that theme, the integration of Cloud SQL for MySQL with Vertex AI is now generally available. This is huge. It means you can invoke online predictions and generate vector embeddings from models hosted in Vertex AI directly from your Cloud SQL instance using simple SQL queries. And with Model Endpoint Management, which is also GA, you can even register and manage endpoints for models from third-party providers like OpenAI. This really unlocks the potential for building generative AI applications on top of your existing relational data. And for Cloud Spanner, a small but useful UI update. When you're using graph query visualizations, you can now right-click a node to get options like expanding or collapsing neighbors and highlighting or hiding nodes. It's a nice quality of life improvement for exploring graph data. Let's round out the episode with a tour of other important platform updates. In the networking world, VPC has some new tricks. You can now use custom organization policy constraints to get more granular control over specific fields for your internal IP ranges. And you can now bring your own IPv6 global unicast addresses to assign to a subnet's internal IPv6 range, giving you more control over your internal addressing scheme. Over in security, Cloud KMS has a new feature in public preview called Auto Key for Projects. This allows for delegated key management where keys are created in the same project as the resources they protect, which is perfect if your project admins are also in charge of key management. This complements the existing centralized model where keys live in a dedicated key project. VPC Service Controls is also expanding its reach, with preview support now available for managed Lustre, allowing you to secure your high-performance file systems within a service perimeter. And for those of you who live and breathe asset management, Cloud Asset Inventory has added support for a host of new resource types. You can now track assets from Apigee, like API proxies and environments, as well as worker pools from Cloud Run, folders from Dataform, and assistants from Discovery Engine. On the developer tools front, Cloud Build is now available in the Asia Southeast 3 region in Jakarta. Developer Connect now supports generic HTTP connections for accessing arbitrary endpoints, and you can also now connect to Secure Source Manager through it. Finally, echoing our big AI theme, both cloud logging and cloud monitoring now have remote MCP servers in preview. Just like with the databases, this allows AI applications to interact directly with your log entries and time series data. And speaking of metrics, you can now ingest OTLP metrics into cloud monitoring using an OpenTelemetry collector, which is also in preview. And that's a wrap for this week's Google Cloud Update. It was a huge week, especially for AI integration. The new remote MCP servers for databases and observability tools are a clear sign of where the platform is heading. And the GA of Vertex AI integration with Cloud SQL for MySQL is a major milestone for building production-ready AI applications. Don't forget to check your GKE clusters and apply the necessary security patches. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another dose of Google Cloud News.